Okay. Okay, folks, we're going to start the next session now. So those of you who are enjoying some great networking, please consider doing so out in the hallway. We're on a very tight schedule here today. Welcome, everyone. This is the Can We Change the Game and Move from Adaptive to Adaptable Learning session. We have a very short 40 minutes to delve into a pretty beefy topic, and thank you guys so much for coming by and listening to us today. Really what this panel is all about is adaptive learning. I think those of us who have been to this conference for many years have been talking about adaptive learning for quite a while. Where are we and where do we need to go with adaptive learning? And to answer that question, rather than having product suppliers or providers here to answer it, we're going to ask the practitioners, the end users, those who are involved in communities where adaptive learning is a hot topic and looking into the adoption of adaptive learning. To do that, we have, starting from my left, Lou Pugliese, who's the Senior Innovation Fellow from Arizona State University. To his left, we have John Fauci, who's Director for Special Projects at the University of North Carolina System Office. To his left, we have Andrew Hurst, who's President of Colorado Technical University. And finally, to Andrew's left, we have Karen Vignari, who's Executive Director of Personalized Learning Consortium at the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. Welcome, panelists.
Thanks, Rob.
We're going to split this discussion, since we don't have too much time, into hopefully 3 roughly equal segments. That means about 12 minutes apiece, which is kind of 3 minutes for each of 4 people to talk. The first section is going to be talking about adaptive and what you've seen adaptive that has maybe worked or not worked, and also what you mean by adaptive, because there are different definitions of that term. That's part 1. Part 2, we're going to talk about, okay, once you've got some adaptive stuff that's working, how do you scale it? How do you scale it? So part 2 is going to be about scaling up. And then part 3 is going to be about that game-changing part. What do we need to look at in the future in terms of adaptive, and where is adaptive going from your perspective? Okay, so is everybody on board with the 3-part series? Okay, so part one, use of adaptive as you define it, that's working well, or maybe has not worked so well. Open discussion. Who would like to go first?
I'm happy to start. So I'm currently the Executive Director of APLU, and we have a grant with 8 universities, including our great host, Arizona State. And before that, I worked with adaptive learning systems at University of Maryland, University College. And so the things that are working well are when we have variations in products, and when you have a product where the faculty are actually using the data to change what they do in the classroom. And the classroom can be online, it can be face-to-face, it can be blended. But this is really about giving the faculty a live stream of data so that they can make interventions at the appropriate time. That sounds easy, but it's not easy. So the where it's not working, we talk to students all the time, and students will tell you, yes, my faculty is using this system, but I don't know why. I'm doing my homework in the system. They never talk about it in class, and therefore there's no results. Until we get an integrated virtual cycle of improvement, we're not really going to see the success that we have in some places. So I'm excited because I think we're just at the tip of this. I'd say Andrew is even further along, as are some of our other panelists.
All right.
Yeah. So
that's a cue.
All right. So at CTU, we've been using adaptive since 2012. I came there about 5 years ago, so I was lucky enough to inherit it within the university system. Across that 7-year period, we've trained over 1,000 faculty, right? To what Karen's saying, this is the most important part, right? We utilize a platform called Realize It, and we branded it in Telepath to get everyone behind it as our own product that would help us learn more about how our students learn, right? And this is the real power of Adaptive from my perspective, is seeing a student actually learn the different concepts within a course and progress through it, right? And then see where those students are excelling and where some are not, and be able to see that in real time. That is huge power for a faculty member. I mean, 90% of our students are online, right? So they don't have that ability to see face-to-face, but they can see those students learning as they're progressing through a course. But they have to adjust how they teach, right? In an online world, this is a little bit, it's been daunting over those years, because there are a lot of professional adjuncts out there who teach in the online space, and they teach in a very methodical fashion. I know on week 3, the students are going to ask about this particular issue, and I've got all the canned answers, and I just pump them out, right? The adaptive piece shows them how to adjust, but they have to adjust. And that's the real power. And what we've seen over time is that it doesn't work in all courses, but in a number of our courses, we see submission rates of assignments go up by at least 10 percentage points, and then passing grades increase. And it's not just people getting A's, the students getting A's, but it's those who might have been a D get a C, and a C get a B, because the faculty is able to hone in on the area of the course that they need help in, and not go over an area that they already have proven mastery in.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. John or Blue?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Sure. And I know part of this question was, what is our definition? I think we would all come up with a very different definition or way to communicate it, but in the end, I think we would all be cohesive in what it really is. But I'll put one out there, and maybe that'll help us to go back and forth a little bit. So when I think about adaptive learning, I think about 2 components, right? The first component being the pedagogical instruction and instructional technologies perspective, if you will, whereby adaptive learning is a form of what we call personalized learning, right? And that personalized learning, to be more specific, is at the instructional sequencing level, where we can create learner-specific instructional sequences to meet that student where he or she is within their learning path or learning mastery to a specific learning objective, right? And then what we have done historically or traditionally through our instructors and through our tutors, we've met with students one-on-one, whether it was daily or weekly or what have you, and we learned our students, we learned their issues and challenges, and redesigned the instructional sequencing. Where adaptive learning comes in is now we're leveraging learning technology, whether it be, or learning technology that comprises applications, the hardware, the back-end analytics, advanced adaptive algorithms as well as machine learning. And we do that, we leverage that learning technology to make that instructional strategy, instructional sequencing, more effective and more efficient and more responsive to our students. And when we apply the adaptive learning, we're able to meet our students where they are, be their guide on the side 24/7 by 365, and we gain all of these extensive analytics, which I'm sure we'll go into later. Now, where I'm seeing it working from the University of North Carolina system perspective, as you probably know, we have 17 institutions, all with unique brands and missions. We have been applying I can talk about 3 different systems today, Acrobatic, Realize It, and the other one escapes me right now, I apologize. But what we're finding from a success perspective is the application of adaptive learning has been successful from a multi-context perspective, as well as from a multidisciplinary perspective. And it has also helped us to address our underserved students. So we've applied it in an HBCU, Fayetteville State University. Am I taking too much time?
No, you're good.
Where we initially employed it in a philosophy course, and it's been so successful that now we're branching out, probably same approach that you all have taken, into math, science, biology, and so forth. But another interesting case study is at UNC Wilmington, a research university on the east coast of North Carolina, and it's been applied in a pathophysiology course. And the unique thing there is they've been applying it in case studies where the variables of the case have been modified and assessments modify so that students don't get used to the same old scenario, and they're able to apply their knowledge at a higher level and challenge their knowledge mastery. So hope that helps.
Lou?
Are we on definition or what works?
Yeah, we're on both. What works and what's your definition of
Kind
it?
of got lost in the question there. Yeah, so for us, I'll build on what Andrew said. I think that from a faculty diagnostic perspective, the ability to be able to look at adaptive learning as it applies to an individual segment of the classroom, so a lot of focus could be and a lot of energy can be directed to that small group. I think what's particularly interesting about our use is that we were using this in an active learning environment. We've been doing this since about 2013, over about 65,000 students and 10 courses. We're now moving to the program level in developing full programs off an adaptive backbone. But again, what's unique about it is that we've got an incredibly diverse audience, an incredibly diverse student base. And I think this is where adaptive learning has the potential to really look specifically at how do you address an incredibly diverse student base that didn't exist maybe 10 years ago.
All right, so I definitely heard a lesson learned in there, which is that adaptive learning products seem to work best if they're used within the context of actually helping the faculty to adapt their pedagogy, their approach, and so forth. And Lou is alluding to even within a program level, potentially course level, program level. Are all the existing products kind of equally well built to enable that faculty to be able to do that sort of adjustment, or are there differences, or are they all equally bad? And it really kind of comes down to it's got to be really good engineering on the part of the instructional design part of the course. Any comments on that?
With our grant, we had, with the help of Titan Partners and the foundation, we had 23 vendors that were pre-selected based on some indicators in terms of a rubric. And even within that rubric, they're still not all at the same level, even if they can answer that they're at the same level. So there is a wide variation. And one of the things that I'm hoping that I can do in the next couple of months is really start looking at the genres of adaptive systems and put together some information about pedagogical benefits, right? Of course, we want what Lou is headed towards, and what, to some extent, I know Cogbooks is helping them with the BioSpine one, where you have an engine that works all the way through the system. But I think we have so much emphasis right now on just getting people the right start, and that should be in the foundation courses, in their first year courses. And I don't think we want to completely replace products like that come from the publishers immediately. I think we can help people understand, faculty, instructional systems, technology folks, what you might get from the system and what you might need in the future. Right? So I think we've really got to learn to scaffold it from the educational perspective, what you're getting from each of these systems. So the short answer is no, not all systems are built alike. And yes, it's very difficult for faculty alone to figure this out. We need a much more cohesive one. But to the point of you being our moderator, the other side we need is the technology that gives us the data we can use. And I think that's dependent on having some kinds of technical standards, of which I'll throw back to somebody else.
Is everyone in agreement with in terms of where we are? Because I'm actually a bit surprised that all of you are talking about adaptive in terms of how it can impact how a faculty changes what they do. And it's not clear to me, having some history in this field, that that's really what the products were designed to do. So I was just trying
I think we're in the
push on
early
it.
stages, Rob. It's very, very early. The science isn't really good and well developed yet. We're still in kind of more of a lockstep rules-based environment where the individual learner is, guided by a set of rules, pre-programmed rules. We're still in an environment, I think, where most of the adaptive systems, the adaptive logic is still human biased to some extent in terms of how they're developed. I do think that, moving towards a more machine-based learning environment is where we need to go. So we're always going to think aspirationally about it. And so, in the purest trajectory of where we need to be, everybody in this room, if we neuroimage their brain, would look very different, right? So how is it that a machine learning-based technology what is our path for development around increasing the science to the extent that it maps to an individual neuroimage? I know that sounds aspirational, but the point being, we really need to get down to the individual cognitive and non-cognitive skill level of an individual learner, and we're still in a rule-based environment, but we're getting very, very good results from early usage.
All right.
And I think what Lou describes is really interesting, but I'm not sure most of us are ready for it. Right? So I think we also have to think about how we help the educational organizations prepare for the use of this data in ways that it has the potential to do. Right?
Right.
And I think I think if the vendors, even if they were, and some of them I would argue are probably 3 steps ahead of us with the science, I don't think we're ready to use it that way.
Yeah, just the authoring culture is different even today, in terms of how they would normally do it. Now that we have 20 years of LMS, we have subject matter experts that are really good at authoring, right?
Yeah.
Now we've got to retrain on how to do content scaffolding and authoring towards a content scaffolding model.
It certainly seems like what we're talking about here also changes the whole return on investment, right, scenario, right? Because we're not just talking about return on investment while I'm buying an adaptive product and I'm expecting my adaptive product itself to create some sort of return, but there's also the investment of the actual pedagogical part, the instructional technology, as well as whatever platform technology, which brings us to part 2, which is about how to scale up. So all of you have seen some successes and have experience with some successes. What do you think are some key lessons learned in terms of how to scale up the successes that you've seen with adaptive? Again, anyone that wants to go first.
I'll take that first. So like I said, we've been in this for 7 years, and it seems like we're just beginning, right? Because it's an infinitely variable path for us in solving for the students. From a scaling perspective, we have the luxury of creating our courses in a centralized environment, right? So that same course runs no matter how many instances of it we run, right? So we've got centralized control of the design that leverages the knowledge of the faculty, but we continue to refine the way we develop content within the platform, adaptive platform. So not in every case do we utilize the platform for the entire course. There'll be segments of it, and it depends upon the different areas of programmatic areas that we've deployed it. The scaling part that's the hardest, though, goes back to the faculty, right? And how you have the faculty on board at the outset, or at least those early champions, those early adopters that understand the power that it's bringing to them to help them teach a very diverse student body. As Lou said, in our courses, our entry-level gateway courses, we could have students that are 22 years old and students who are 60. Right? And it's a very a fluid situation, and the more information the faculty have, the better. But it's that process of getting buy-in from the faculty, having support for the faculty, right? The technology is not there to replace, it's there to enhance, right? And I remember the first time I saw the system that we use today, it was incredible the amount of information that was available to a faculty. And I was like, this is fantastic. But I'm like, how do we get faculty to actually use it all? Right? Because the amount of clicks it took me to get to some of those screens right? You think time. And then the faculty is sitting there, I'm teaching how many students, right? So it's really a continual refinement. What I've seen is we've been using the same platform for 7 years. And that's given us a significant amount of experience to get better. If I was an institution and I was looking at 4 or 5 different platforms, I don't know how I would ever get to scale.
Right.
Because there's no time in learning what works and what doesn't. I mean, we've crashed and burned many times on courses where we thought we could put content in, and it would just automatically, the great results from the students would come out the other side.
Okay.
And it's not the case.
Unlike CTU, APL universities have a history of faculty first and academic freedom, right? So scale is really hard, right? But what we're learning about scale is actually there's some disagreement with what Andrew was just sharing, and that is the disagreement is not around the faculty. You do have to work to support the faculty, but the disagreement is, can we get to scale with multiple products? And the answer is actually I've got folks in the room. I've got in Northern Arizona and Ole Miss and others all in the room that are using as many as, what are we using, 15 products over there? And at least 4 or 5 of them have gotten to all the sections. Now, from a technology management, you may be a little concerned about that, but right now, the level of experimentation, I wouldn't want to take that away from faculty, but what I would do is, and this is what we have done in our grants, if you're going to be part of the grants, you have to agree that one faculty doesn't speak for a course. It has to be unified across course sections. We have to work together, and that's a big challenge for non-corporate public universities to go to that. But we also have a big responsibility. What is the fairness to any student walking in the room by chance of enrolling, at number 100 or number 1,000 and having 2 very different pass rates? So we have a responsibility to make sure our faculty have the best tools to deliver course section pass rates that are within a minor variation than 1. So getting to scale requires cooperation of faculty teaching a course, and that is going to take us a lot of work. The other side is I wouldn't think that you only want to start with just one platform. I think you need to learn a lot about how far can a publisher platform, whether it's McGraw-Hill or Macmillan, take you to the next kind of iteration of course before you want to jump into a whole redesign, which I strongly believe that Andrew's, CTU has done a fabulous job with their redesign, but I don't think we can do everything at once. So I think universities really have to think about what is, quote unquote, the next step forward and what is our long-term goal. So getting to scale is going to take a lot of things that the universities have to figure out.
Wow. John or Lou?
Yeah, sure. So to address the 2 areas that I think the group has already addressed, but I won't reiterate. One is faculty. At least within the UNC system and within the IMS leadership group, a number of institutions are part of IMS to help figure out what are the practitioner needs with growing and scaling adaptive learning, right? So that community, and then there's also the UNC system community that I can speak to again, right? So there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of excitement around what this really is, but I think what happens many times is that the communications and how we bring that message forward in a package that is recognizable to the faculty, right? I think sometimes they hear all the market hype, they hear all that, the market quick, we need a quick summary, catchy summary. That may sound great, but it doesn't translate with the faculty, right? So I think we have to be really clear on what the instructional advantage here is with this technology. Now, from a technology perspective, without getting way down into the weeds on how to fix this, but to grow and scale, we really need to come up with what we believe is a framework for a standardized lesson, right? Whereby all of the adaptive learning systems understand what the data elements are associated with the adaptive learning system, what they mean, so that as we're passing these data between the various systems, we know what we're receiving, we know that this is a mastery outcome, and we even need to get down to the level with, at what level did this student master this, right? So that as I'm going between courses and systems, I can say, John has a really good concept understanding and he can recall, but he hasn't shown that he can apply this information yet, right? So now I need to design a sequence that enhances that student and moves him along to that level of mastery. But again, from a standards perspective, it always comes down to this. We want the data, right? To scale, we know right now that the adaptive learning systems are in what we call, as we all know, and have seen before, another walled garden. And right in the middle of that walled garden is that data pond. And we want to get our hands on that. We want real-time information coming from these systems so that we can pass it and dump it into a data lake with other systems with similar learning analytics.
I think Lou's ready to jump in on that walled garden.
Walled garden. No, I'll actually build on it because I'm a little bit biased because I run a digital efficacy learning lab where we do a significant amount of research on the efficacy of lots of modalities around digital learning. And I think, we're all doing, as an industry, we're doing great work in experimentation, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we need to do is really start to band together and move beyond the statistical reporting of our successes. Every time a new Inside Higher Ed article comes out about, gee, how great these students achieved, that's terrific, but it's not inferential, and we're not controlling for anything. So in order to get to scale, we really have to understand what actually works from a predictive perspective and how do you replicate that predictability, and then how do you take that predictability over a broad subject area and not just mathematics. So.
I'm just fascinated by this discussion because my perception of the evolution of these adaptive learning products is many of them 7 years ago or more started coming from the ilks of the publishers and the publishing community, very, very domain specific, right? Very, very course focused, very, very much a sales model directly to an individual faculty member. And now we're talking about, basically a revolution in terms of redesign, cooperation, all those things that are really, really hard to achieve, which strikes me as the need for a shared understanding and ownership that goes very broad and very deep. And I think maybe, Andrew, you've had a chance to achieve more of that because of your particular situation, maybe than others, so you're a bit ahead of the curve, I would say, there.
Maybe a little bit, but we're learning every day, and I think just in the last 4 months or so, we finalized some integration, and we use Civitas for predictive analytics around how our students are performing, and with our partnership with them, we've mapped, I don't know, it's like 140 data tables or something like that. But we were able to tap into the Realize It adaptive platform and pull many indicators of student progress and mastery level out of that. And they were able to give us 7 key predictors now that will clearly show future persistence, performance levels and whatnot. So we're just now getting that data. This is the first time we've been able to unlock it. And so when I talked before about faculty seeing this, that's at the classroom level. That's at the that's at the grassroots level. But we weren't able to pull it all together and begin to see what impact it's having. And so we're just now there. I mean, we've got to get beyond just running some massive report and trying to ingest it.
Right, and your sense is that data will be very enabling for the faculty.
Yeah, because that's going to give them powerful information to go back and then refine the designs, right? So it's only the platforms are only as good as what you design within them in most cases.
Okay, well, I think we've John, did you want to add something on that?
And I don't want to speak for CTU, but I think one of the really good pieces of information from the research, CTU, UCF, and Realize It, was now we're also able to understand adaptive learner behaviors, right? So that a new pedagogy starts to form around that as well. I hate to keep coming back to pedagogy, but at the end of the day, that's what this is really all about, leveraging the technology to optimize, our instructional sequencing. But if we're able to understand these behaviors, now we can have targeted interventions, remedial activities, and so forth, and understand it from a predictive perspective as well.
All right, now, so we've already started going there, but let's move to part 3, which is where do we need to go from here? From adaptive to adaptable. What's holding us back in terms of the adaptable technology and so forth? What are your thoughts? We've talked a little bit about machine learning. We've talked about program level versus course level. We've talked about having collaborating to do some research. Let's hear what else you have to say about that.
Could use
John?
So another subcategory of adaptive learning, automated writing and evaluation systems, right? Automating writing evaluation systems enable faculty to shift their strategies to lean on the system to help students to develop their mechanical writing aspects so that the faculty doesn't have to deal with that, and that's probably harsh, but doesn't have to deal with that when they have a new paper coming in, right? Just that's very simply stated. But adaptive learning systems, AW, automated writing evaluation system, or the other adaptive learning systems that we're just talking about, where they are right now with their ability to assess and guide learning is really at the mid-level of knowledge mastery, right? Application. For this really to catch on and to be really transformative learning, it's going to be really nice when we get to the point where these systems can recognize contextual types of understanding and learning as well, where they can start to take on the co-creation of knowledge with the student. So there's that guide on the side moving along. And I think that's one of the places where we want to go in the future.
I think that we ought to be at the opposite of two extremes. One is, how do we work really, really hard in experimentation and transforming the teaching practice with new technologies like this? And how do we create kind of a bottoms-up approach? But at the same time, I think the potential is so huge here in terms of what we can do, and looking at other industries in financial services, healthcare, manufacturing, how we're moving, in healthcare alone, they can map the human genome with AI and ML. And so how do maybe what we do is create a DARPA, for advancing, the adaptive logic models, the adaptive technologies, but at the same time, trying to reach for the potential, but dealing today with the teaching practice and the pedagogy.
Mm-hmm. Well, to the DARPA idea, I think in the audience we have the director of the Every Learner Everywhere network, and partly that is their role in terms of getting us to collaborate more, particularly to serve the students who are in the most need of that. So I say where we have to go is we're really in need, and I would go back. I represent APLU, right? I'm not going to push back on the vendors as much as I'm going to push back on the universities, right? The universities have to create an instructional and academic instructional system that really begins to be a system, right? It begins to actually, instead of being, one person at a time, whether you're a great technologist or whether you're a great faculty, that isn't going to work for us anymore. We really have to begin to approach how are we going to build an instructional system that works toward that future. And honestly, I think that's going to be the harder part of this, right? Because the things that are possible and that John's talking about, and I think to some extent that Lou's talking about, actually make courses commodities and mean that you need less faculty. You have a system that can teach. If that's the way we're going to go with dependence upon the systems, and I think we don't want to go that way. There is value in the human interpreting, giving you information that's very particular to your field, giving you empathy. And I think what we really need to do is figure out how we integrate those two things. And I just feel like a lot of that weight rests on us, the universities and the colleges, to begin to think about a new system of collaborative teaching with these tools.
Very interesting. So,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
As a social constructivist myself, I'm really not interested in the systems taking over. What I'm really interested in is the system being there when the faculty member can't be. At 2 o'clock in the morning when he or she's studying for the quiz the next day, or providing that guide on the side at any time, anywhere when he or she needs it, because that's when learning happens. And that's my perspective. Not to push back, but just to say that
No?
my perspective is from that view.
Andrew, where do we need to go next?
I think we need to think about the consumer, right? And how they are learning today, and begin to integrate as many of those pieces that are out there, and maybe as mundane as they might seem to all of us sitting here, but we all learn a significant amount every day utilizing our supercomputers that we carry around with us, right? And so we're very focused on the mobile aspect of everything, and how can we integrate all of these pieces to where it's easy for a student to interact with the university, to interact with their faculty member in their course, whether they're doing adaptive work or not, and it's just as easy for a faculty member to interact with their students, right? And empower them with the technology, but it has to be seamless. It can't be logging into 10 different systems, right? Because I've always been a fan of ease of use breeds more use, right? Make it easy to consume it. And then, when we've seen a significant advance just in integrating more pieces with mobile. And we don't want to rebuild the back end of our university, right? That's a little bit too expensive.
Yeah, a little bit.
But we can put a different layer on the top of it.
Yeah.
And then we got to serve up the data to faculty and students, or that interactive mobile moment where they've got, I've got 5 minutes. Give me the 5 pieces of content within this course that I can consume, and then let me do an exercise with it.
Right.
And then jump out, right?
So it sounds like we're talking about redesigning almost the whole instructional experience so that it's more adaptive and more integrated, right? And therefore makes the lives of both faculty and students better, and getting the right data out at the right time. The last panel that was in this room was talking about student success, and we were talking about a lot of the traditional stuff, right? Let's figure out where students are not getting it and give them the help that they need to get and so forth, right? I think you guys are thinking that adaptive has the opportunity to go even further or better in that regard, because it's generating perhaps more meaningful data. Is that correct, or do I have that right or not? And so do you think that's a nice sort of focus for the next kind of phase of progress on some of these products?
The data that can come from these systems are absolutely more meaningful than much of the student success data, which is most entirely demographic. Don't tell me where a person lives and that they can't succeed. That is not a good use of data. What we need are data that absolutely helps us change the trajectory of that information, and we're going to find that in these academic systems, but we need to do it in a way that redesigns how we collaborate and how we listen. I think back to both Lou and Andrew's point, like, not only do we need to collaborate across universities and disciplines, we need to listen to our students. It is remarkable when you have student focus groups, how they know what's working and what's not working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's sounding like to me that this whole field of adaptive, in terms of where it's going, is the next big benefit is to produce data that's actually more useful today than what teachers or even advisors may have relative to how they help students, and even the timeliness by which they might help them. Everyone's shaking their head up and down as that.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Well, we've had a great panel today, so and we're out of time. It went really fast, so let's thank the panel. I hope you enjoyed